Record. All right. Good evening, brothers. Welcome to the September 10th edition of the educational series. If you've been joining us in the last couple, we had a couple good discussions here in these last couple weeks. Hopefully this one will be as good. Again, this is not a tiled meeting, so please govern yourselves accordingly. As you heard, I did start the recording here a few moments ago. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. To send questions, please use the chat feature. We'll cover them at the end, or we'll open up the mic so people can ask questions at the end as well. And I will post a link to a survey into the chat when we get close to the end of the session. And please fill that out, and you'll also get it via email as well later on in the week. Upcoming, so we will have Sacred Geometry by Brother Hans, Alchemy Symbols by Brother Brian, and a few others coming up till the 15th of October. And with no further ado, we present to you Introduction to Kabbalah and Freemasonry. And Brother Gene, I will stop share and let you take over.
Thanks, Jason. Let me share my screen first and get set up here. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, it's kind of funny because we ask them to mute and then you ask a question, so it's kind of amusing. Anyways.
Yeah. Just a second. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, as Jason mentioned, my name is Gene Mishenko, and I am part of Templar Lodge 176 on St. Louis Park, for those of you who don't know me. And I have the pleasure of talking to you guys today on the topic of Kabbalah in Freemasonry. Kabbalah, the short version of it is, it's Jewish mysticism. And for a long time, ever since kind of childhood, I've been fascinated by Judaism. I'm not Jewish myself, I am actually Christian, but something about Judaism really attracted me, the mystical side of it, or it seemed just very unknown to me, and that was the allure that kind of drew me in. So I started out, one of my friends visiting from Chicago one time who was Jewish, on Yom Kippur, he invited me to go to synagogue with him, and I did, after which I picked up a flyer for Judaism 101 class, and that was a year-long class that I kind of took, and that led me eventually to Kabbalah, and Kabbalah was eventually what led me to Freemasonry, and that's how, I'm here today talking to you guys. That was kind of the progression of things, and of course, along with other esoteric thoughts and philosophies such as alchemy and Hermeticism. Once you kind of start exploring the esoteric side of Freemasonry, you realize that all of these schools of thought are interrelated. The reason that I got attracted to Kabbalah more so, because just from my own personal findings, or this is subjective, it seemed like it was the ancient of the more ancient of the ones of the esoteric schools that I was looking at. And that's why, kind of given the previous background that I had, I kind of got into it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And the first question, for all of us would be, why should a Mason even care about Kabbalah? The reason is because Kabbalah is a part of our rituals and symbols. It is prevalent within our lodge, even the layout of the lodge. It is prevalent within our rituals. Furthermore, it gives deeper meaning to our craft. This is what we talk about further light in Masonry. We all are there to improve ourselves and to become better men. And Kabbalah is a philosophical school of thought that provides that. As I just was mentioning, it does provide a moral and a spiritual guidance besides the philosophical aspect of life. And within Masonry, we focus on the King Solomon's Temple. This theme is prevalent throughout our decrees and our allegories. And this the building of this temple is actually the spiritual temple within all of us. Kabbalah provides that building plan and order behind that design. Within Kabbalah, there is a practical and as well as a spiritual application on life, and that's what I liked. You know, there are things that you can extract, the practical side of things that you can use. You can look through the lens of Kabbalah and the Kabbalistic tree, or the tree of life, which we'll see later in the presentation, and you can apply that, you know, to any decision you make, to any situation you face, as well as you can draw on spirituality from meditation upon the tree of life that we'll talk about later. So let's see what some of the luminaries of Freemasonry think about Kabbalah. We can't have a presentation without, of course, mentioning Albert Pike, as Tracy mentioned in his previous presentation. Albert Pike actually mentions Kabbalah several hundred times, and he has some really strong, really bold comments regarding it and how it is very central to Masonry. In this particular instance, like this quote, he talked about that Masonry is a search after light. That search leads us directly back to Kabbalah, and that's from his works of Morals and Dogma. Albert Mackey, author and also philosopher, said that much use is made of it, Kabbalah, in advanced degrees, and entire rites have been constructed on its principles. And that is true within Scottish Rite and the degrees that we perform. And Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree, said that the theories of Kabbalism are inextricably interwoven in the tenets of alchemy, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, and Freemasonry. This is another quote by Albert Pike, and like I said, some of his quotes are that he says within Morals and Dogma are very bold. He said, all Masonic associations owe Kabbalah their secrets and their symbols. And another quote I didn't include, but I figure I mentioned it. He said he went as far as saying all religions have issued from Kabbalah and returned to it. So what is Kabbalah? As I mentioned to you at the beginning of this presentation, Kabbalah is Jewish mystical tradition that uses symbolism to understand the manifestations of God in the universe. This deals with understanding of God, creation, understanding the relationship between the two, and the nature of our own very soul. To help you kind of understand where does Kabbalah actually fit on the spectrum, you know, of Judaism as a whole. So we have Torah, and that is Torah, you know, is translated as instruction, and that is the written law. Which one could take and look upon as the body of Judaic tradition. We have the Talmud, which was compiled around 500, the 4th century. And that's the rabbinical interpretations of Torah. And that can be looked upon as the rational soul. And then we have Kabbalah. This is the mystical interpretation, or one could look at it as the immortal soul. The word Kabbalah actually comes from a shorter word, which is Kabbal. Kabbal is, in Hebrew is to receive. Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, Kabbalah means unwritten, or in other words, oral tradition. So one might be wondering, okay, to receive what? And the answer is both simple and also impossible for a Kabbalist. The greatest joy, according to Kabbalists, and the goal of life, is to receive knowledge of God and the guidance for living. So in other words, enlightenment. So as I was mentioning, many of these esoteric philosophies, they're interrelated, and it is because they talk about the same thing at the end of the day. Whether you choose Hermeticism, alchemy, or whether you go, even if you choose Christianity or Judaism or Sufism within Islam or Kabbalah, whatever the case may be, they all are talking about for attaining the knowledge of God, or um, how to understand God. Some might call it nirvana, some might call it philosopher's stone, some might call it enlightenment, some might call it Merkaba, as you will see later here within the presentation. But they were all talking about the same thing. And finally, this is a very important piece in the practical application of Kabbalah to a Kabbalist within his life. The Kabbalists want to be aware of God at all times because God is at the center of our existence. What I mean by that is the Kabbalist comes in with an intention from the moment he wakes up. And what I mean by intention, it is the intention to honor God. This is if we look at on the next slide, this is doing everything in your daily life, from the most mundane and routine aspects of your life, from starting the morning by brushing your teeth and doing that with an intention to honor God. One might wonder, how the heck do you really do that? What does that really mean? And some of it is more complex than it's harder than in others. But what the Kabbalists are really talking about is doing this through blessing and doing this through gratitude. This is praising God in everything that we do, and to be thankful for what we have and for what we're able to do. So for example, we say a blessing. This is the same thing in Christian traditions as in Judaic traditions, saying a blessing before the meal. But why? What is the point of doing that? Reciting the blessing before the meal helps to release the divine sparks within the food, as it would be according to Kabbalists. And I will talk about divine sparks a little bit more when we get to creation aspect of Kabbalism. But the way one can look at it is, if one eats food with proper intention, the food becomes not only the source of physical nutrients, but also of divine light that offers spiritual nourishment and fortitude to go on and perform acts of loving and kindness. So that's a powerful thing to understand, and allow me to show you another example. There's a Japanese doctor, his name is Masaru Emoto, and he did this water experiment. And this water experiment included that he took vessels of water, and on some of them he put labels. He put positive labels like thank you, like wisdom, like truth, eternal, peace, I love you. And some of them he put negative labels, you fool, you make me sick, evil. In some cases, he took polluted water, and in some cases, he took polluted water and prayed over it. And then he froze that water. And what's interesting was the results that came out afterwards. In the vessels that contained water where there were positive labels or positive words said over them, the snowflakes that formed, as you can see from this example that I'm showing you, were orderly, structured, versus the ones where negativity was around that vessel of water. The snowflakes were deformed. So this is what I'm talking about intention. It is the power that we have within us, the power of thought within our minds, that our intention have the ability to influence the world around us. That's why I actually, after researching this, I started actually praying before my food, and I say something very simple like, God, thank you for the nourishment, I'm about to receive. and thank you for the plants and the animals and mushrooms and fungi and fish. Something very simple, but I do believe and am of the opinion that positively kind of charging, myself and the food I'm about to receive will help it nourish me better and beyond the physical aspect. And so that is what I mean, and that is what the Kabbalists mean by intentions within Kabbalah. So a little bit of history on Kabbalah. So here are the claims to the divine authorship. Supposedly, Adam actually was the very first Kabbalist. When he was expelled from the Garden of Eden, Archangel Raziel gave him Kabbalah. However, through unworthiness of humans, we eventually lost it. Next, Abraham received Kabbalah through Melchizedek as part of the covenant made with God. Yet once again, through unworthiness of humans, we lost it. And then Moses, I don't know if some folks don't know that he actually didn't go up just once up the Mount Sinai. The very first time he went up, he received the 10 Commandments that we know, but he made multiple trips up there. And it was the second time when he went up to meet with God is when he received Kabbalah. Just one second. So there are two central texts within Kabbalah. One of them is Sefer Yetzirah. This is what's known as Book of Formation. It is believed to have been written by Abraham himself 4,000 years ago. In reality, we don't know for sure, but that is the primary kind of belief by Kabbalists. So after the authorship of Sefer Yetzirah, perhaps 4,000 years ago, we have the Roman destruction of the temple around 70 CE, which starts the rabbinic period that followed it, and then during which Talmud was written. And then after the destruction of temple, and while during the Roman persecution, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai hides in a cave and supposedly has a vision of Moses and Elijah, the prophet, and writes Zohar. This is the second central text of Kabbalah, which is the Book of Splendor. It is important to mention that Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, it deals with how the universe was created through 32 wondrous ways of wisdom. This emanations of God. It is created through 10 Sephirot, which are spheres or these emanations that God has created, which we will cover shortly, and through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The Zohar, on the other hand, is a book discussing the mystical aspects of Torah. It talks about the mystical psychology and the nature of God and soul. When Zohar was written, like I said, it is believed by many it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai, but it didn't come out until the 13th century in Spain when Kabbalistic rabbi Moses de Leon revealed the Zohar. So there's controversy that exists to this day who actually wrote it. Some believe it's Rabbi Moses de Leon, and some believe it's Shimon Bar Yochai, but that's, I'll leave that up to you to decide. And for us as Masons, through my own research and the sources that I read, there is the evidence suggests that Kabbalistic symbolism was adopted by operative Masons, by actual stonemasons, long before the actual emergence of speculative Freemasonry in 1717. And that can be seen in some of the architecture that exists today from that time. So Kabbalah and the craft. as I mentioned to you before, for us within the craft, King Solomon and building of temple are the central themes. This relates to beauty, symmetry, and sacred geometry of the universe. This is the macrocosm. And then we have us and our soul. That's the microcosm. Tracy did a fantastic job when he covered last week the Hermetic principle. And this concept of macrocosm and microcosm was explained in the second principle of Hermeticism, which is as above, so below, as below, so above. And we hear that in Freemasonry all the time. Meaning, and he also gave a very excellent example that it is amazing that some of these esoteric philosophies kind of match with what we are finding in science. When you take, as he mentioned last time, when you take the microscope and you start looking under the microscope, you start seeing these patterns, these fractals, these spirals, right? And it is the same patterns and fractals you see when you pick up a telescope and you look out beyond beyond the sky into the heavens, and you see spirals or galaxies. It is absolutely amazing, but that is exactly what this is, what we mean, but we talk about macrocosm and microcosm and their relationship between one another. And we also, within Masonry, talk about building our own temple to be the residence of God. This is uniting that macrocosm with our microcosm. To a Kabbalist, the body was seen as a living book of nature, containing the fixed and the flawless of divinity. The body as a temple is an idea that predates even St. Paul, who wrote, do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? This is Corinthians 6:19. And by the second temple period, even Jesus is quoted saying, the temple of his body, that which can be found in John 2:21. So the Kabbalists believe that the Temple of Solomon is indeed a representation of the universe around us and ourselves. And it is interesting that the fact that they believe in the same concept, the Temple of Solomon, just like the same way as we do within our craft, believe in the building of the Temple of King Solomon. And finally, Freemasonry served, this is what I believe, Freemasonry served as a medium for the continuance of some of these oral traditions and oral teachings of the esoteric philosophies and ancient wisdoms, such as Kabbalah, maybe more especially like Kabbalah and Hermeticism and alchemy. And no good esoteric philosophy can be without its own myth of creation. And Kabbalistic creation is an interesting one at that, in my opinion. So in the beginning, there was Ein Sof. Ein Sof, imagine it was simply light. That's it. It was limitless light. And that was God. That is what God is, Ein Sof, limitless light. So then the question came up, one would ask, well, how could there be creation if everything is filled with divine light? That meant God had to step aside. And that is what in Hebrew, what in Judaism and Kabbalah we call tzimtzum. This is contracting. Contracting of Ein Sof, of the infinite light, in order to allow space in which finite and independent realm could exist. To illustrate this further, so imagine all of that white light, and then God shrunk, he created a void. He created a void and where his creation could take place. And he created the 10 Sephirot, through which light went through and tried to fill it. Allow me to read a quote from Rabbi Isaac Luria. And Rabbi Isaac Luria, he lived in the 15th century, and he is considered to be one of the greatest Kabbalists to this day. The Kabbalah that we study today is actually based on his teachings. It's called Luriaric Kabbalah. And his interpretation of creation was, prior to creation, there was only the infinite or Ein Sof filling all existence. When it arose in God's will to create the world and emanated, he contracted. He contracted himself in the point at the center. So God shrunk to an infinitely singular point in the very center, in the very center of his light. He restricted that light, distancing it into sides surrounding the central point so that there remained a void, a hollow, empty space away from the central point. After this, Tzimtzum, after this contraction, he drew down from the Ein Sof into a single straight line of light from his light surrounding the void. And this you can see in this illustration. God created the void, he shrunk, contracted to the center, created the 10 emanating spheres, and then a beam of light came down to the central point of it. So in the space of that void, he emanated, created, formed, and made all worlds. The next main concept within the creation, Kabbalistic creation, is Shavura. And this means shattering of the vessels. When that light from Ein Sof, from that limitless light, came down to the center and went through the vessels, through the 10 Sephirot, it was too much. The light was so much that it shattered the vessels. These vessels were the attributes of God, as we will talk about shortly. And when they shattered, it created holy sparks of broken vessels, which fell down into the void. And that is what formed souls and objects of our world. So the final aspect, then, the reason we were created, according to Kabbalistic creation, is it is our task to repair the world by gathering and restoring the divine sparks from these broken shards. What I mean by that, repairing the world, what it means to a Jewish person, or especially a Kabbalist, is you accomplish these goals by prayer, worship, and you do it by performance of mitzvot. Mitzvot are the 613 kind of commandments within Judaism, thou shalt not eat pork or cleft foot animal or shellfish, that type of stuff. Those are all mitzvot. So essentially, one could look at it by doing good deeds in the world. That is the way how we worship God and how we repair this world, by gathering and restoring, and we send these divine sparks back up to Ein Sof. It is a way for us to redeem our souls, or to allow us to purify our souls. And we're given in Kabbalism, you have the concept of reincarnation. You're given lifetime after lifetime, so you can continue to collect these sparks to continue to purify yourself. So what you saw on the previous page is actually one way to look at what the Kabbalists call the tree of life. And this particular representation is something most of you might be already familiar with. This is the Lurianic representation of the tree of life. So this diagram essentially represents the actual attributes of God, as Kabbalists believe. These are different. The spheres are called Sephirot, and they're emanations of God. At the top we have Keter, which is crown, and then into which the limitless light flowed in, the Ein Sof. From there, it went to the Rite, to wisdom, which is Chokhmah. which is the masculine side of the tree. From there, it went to the left to Bina, understanding, which is the feminine side. And then next we have kindness, which is Hesed, which went to judgment, Gevurah, which went to beauty, which is Tiferet, which then flowed into victory, which is Netzah, which then flowed into glory, which is Hod, then flowing into foundation, which is Yesod, and finally at the very bottom, this is us. This is the kingdom, also known as Malkut. In the longer version of this presentation, I actually go through the explanations of what they actually mean. But I will tell you, the further up you go, the more kind of vague it becomes. The further down you go, the more kind of specific, the more understanding to us it becomes. Look at it, look at this tree and at the Sephiroth in this fashion. It's broken up into kind of 3 pillars, which we'll talk about in just a second as well. But imagine everything on the right. This is kind of raw energy, right? This is, think about just raw sheer energy. Like victory is a representation of willingness to do something. This is you wanting, like when you get up in the morning, you make your to-do list, you're excited, you want to go there. This is a painter who wants to paint the painting, and he's excited and he starts doing it, right? The glory is to the left. When you're done painting, this is the painter stepping back and admiring the beauty of it. Or imagine kindness, Hesed. This is the lovingness, right? You can be so loving, but is lovingness has to go in a pair with the opposite of it, judgment. Imagine, the example I can give you is, imagine if a parent is overly loving. The parent allows the kid to do anything he wants. The kid wants a cookie, sure, you can have a cookie. You want sugar, sure, you can have as much sugar. But in the end, too much love can be a bad thing because you have to have rules. Too much sugar is a bad thing. You can have a cookie, but you can't have a whole package, right? That's judgment. So on the left, you have the energy. On the, I'm sorry, on the right, you have the energy. On the left, imagine you have the container to contain that energy, to give it some parameters, to give it definition. Raw energy on the right doesn't have definition. It's just like, imagine like you go, like it's like you go forward. The Sephiroth on the left is what give you the direction. And the ones in the middle is the balance, that's the harmony. So what is it? What is this tree really? This is essentially the blueprint of the universe, as I mentioned, the macrocosm and your soul, the microcosm. This 10 Sephiroth, which we talked about, I already explained, these are the divine emanations of God's attribute, the channels of creation, and the archetypes of existence. And we have 22 paths of correspondence that connect them. These are interrelated correspondences that connect all of these Sephiroth. And at the very top, what flows in is the Ein Sof, the pure divine light. This is God prior to any self-manifestation. So in summary, the first 3 Sephiroth, think of it like this, and when applying to your daily life. The first 3 Sephiroth, what they really talk about, this is your idea manifesting in your head, right? Nothing has happened yet, an idea is just coming around in your head. Next, you have the next triad, which is kindness, judgment, beauty. They form the heart or the emotion. Your idea starts to give you an emotion around what you're thinking about. The third triad is you starting to act upon that idea. You start to bring it to light, into this world, into being. And finally, Malkut, the kingdom, This is the real manifestation of the idea into the concrete world of reality. So in the study of Sifrot and the correspondence to a greater understanding of God, so the reason why we study Sifrot and their correspondence, because it helps us with the understanding of God, creation, and our soul. I've talked to you guys, so as we already looked at the tree of life, you can't help but notice that there are 3 pillars. Once again, you know, this is called the tree of life, but it is also called the Kabbalistic pillars. And the 2 outer pillars now relating to our craft, which is wisdom and strength. That's Boaz and Yakin, or Jashin. The 3rd pillar, the one that's in the middle, represents equilibrium. It represents within our craft the initiate standing between Boaz and Yakin. You can, if we look at wisdom, the pillar of wisdom, or also known as the pillar of mercy, this is the masculine, the yang, the giving, the positive. This is the movement, expansion, creation, sheer force, that raw force I was talking about. This is the yakin, and representation, wisdom is represented, worshipful master within our lodge represents wisdom, the King Solomon. Strength, the pillar of strength, or the pillar of severity as it is also known, is the feminine, the yin, the receptivity, the negative. But I don't mean in the word, it doesn't mean in a sense negative, you know, it means just simply as the duality of the universe, as we have positive and negative, we have yin and yang. This is the contraction. This is what gives shape and form. This is the opposite of creation, what can be destruction. This is the container. And this is represented by Boaz, the senior warden within our lodge, who represents the Hiram king of Tyre. And finally, we have the middle pillar. This is beauty, equilibrium. This is the balance, the harmony, the union of the opposites. The 2 pillars on the opposite sides, they are, you can't, like, that is what I meant when you use this Kabbalistic tree of life to look at situations or decisions. You can identify, and if you study the Sifrot for what they really mean, you can identify, where do you fall? Am I leaning too much in the right? Am I leaning too much in the left? And the answer is, you want to be in the equilibrium. You want to be in that middle pillar where you have balance, harmony, union of opposites. And this is what is represented by the candidate within our lodge, or the junior warden. And the candidate, the initiate, representing Hiram Abiff. I'm gonna do a time check because I'm running at 7:09. Do you guys want me to speed up? Because I can skip the next.
You can keep going. Don't worry.
Okay. The other main concept that I will cover, and we will be wrapping up, are the 4 worlds. So as just a second ago, we looked at the Kabbalistic tree in a pillar form, which was vertical. We can now look at the Kabbalistic tree in the horizontal form, and you will see that it can be broken up into 4 different worlds. These 4 different worlds also can be referred to as Jacob's ladder, the rungs on the Jacob's ladder. This is the representation of the initiate going through the phases of initiation within through the degrees. So the 4 worlds denote the concept of emanation of the creative life force from Ein Sof through the progressive planes of being. Like I said, the ones at the top, Absolute, or emanation, is probably to us the most vague. And then you start defining more and more and more as you go down. You have creation, Bria, you have formation, Yetzirah, and you have Isaiah, which is action. Oops. The tree of life is, as I mentioned, is referred to also as Jacob's ladder. And for us at the Masonic level, this represents the various levels of awareness and consciousness that the candidate is taken through, with the candidate being taken through at the bottom through action, Isaiah, which is the material world. That's the entered apprentice. Go into the mental plane, which is fellowcraft, the formation, which then goes to spiritual plane, creation, which this is the master mason. And the final, or the ineffable, the unattainable one is the divine plane. This is us going through our Masonic journey to try to achieve that which Kabbalists call the knowledge of God, which is the greatest pleasure, according to a Kabbalist, that one could have in life, or enlightenment, in other words. So the four worlds, Azimuth, on this level, and I will promise I will go really quick through this. So Azimuth is on this level. This is the light of Ein Sof is still united with the source. So this is so close to God that there's no good, there's no evil at this level. The souls in divine creation cannot sense their own existence. So we, our own soul, is the result of the Ein Sof, the light coming through these emanations and eventually falling on our plane, right? But at this level, so what I'm trying to say is we are part of God. Our soul, that spark, is part of God. It is that spark that we hope to one day reclaim, up to Ein Sof. But at that level, at the Ein Sof level, or at the crown triad, the soul doesn't. There's no. They exist as one. The soul and the divine. And as I mentioned below, all is united as one. This is unity. The way to imagine this, as I mentioned to you guys, this is the initial flash of inspiration. Just a concept. You don't even know what you don't know the details. You like, this is just a brief inspiration. You want to do something, like you have an inspiration to paint a picture, to pick up the instruments and make something out of wood, right? To create something. This is that initial flash. You don't even know how you're going to do it just yet. Then you have, so this is going down, and in these worlds, going down to the next plane, which is Bria. This is creating something out of nothing. This is the first concept of creation, but yet without shape or form, but creation starts to have a sense of its own existence, meaning separate from God. This is creation of the soul and the highest angels. And the way to imagine this for us, this is broadening the concepts. You start developing the concept, the details, okay, you start to understand how you can do this. You start perhaps, visualizing it at this point. And then you move to Yetzirah, formation. Yetzirah is that this plane deals with created being assumed into shape. Emotional attachment to the project forms. This is devotion of the soul and angels to God through divine emotion. Creation begins to sense their distance from Bria. We start to realize that we're distancing from the upper plane. The way for us to understand this is emotional involvement in the drawing of actual plans. You're excited about this project, you take pen and paper, you start doodling, you start maybe making a list. It starts coming to fruition and more details start to come. And then finally, Isaiah, this is doing things on the physical plane, the pedal to the metal, so to say. This is you pick up that hammer, you pick up that paintbrush, whatever the case is, and you start acting upon it. This is level of survival where being interacts with the environment. This is how the individual uses material world determines good and evil, Nothing is permanent on this this level. Everything is temporary. Everything has a beginning and everything has an end. And like I said, the way for us to imagine this is construction, building, completion of the project, and the start of the finite existence. So there's an interesting concept within the Kabbalistic tree, and now I will relate this to Scottish Rite though as well, as so we have the 10 Sephiroth, right? The 10 spheres, the 10 emanations, the 10 attributes of God, and we have 22 paths, which can be labeled as 22 Hebrew letters. Together, they make up 32. And that's how many degrees we have within Scottish Rite. But yet, there's a hidden Sephiroth, which is called Da'at. And Da'at means knowledge. Da'at is in the location of the mystical state where all 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life are united as one. So properly, Da'at is not really a Sephirah, but rather it is all Sephiroth united as one. Nevertheless, sometimes Da'at is counted or considered as a Sephirah instead of Keter, because Keter is the crown one is so unknown. And it is the reflection of the infinity of Keter. So this, like I said, matches the Scottish Rite 32 degrees, and we have an honorary 33rd degree, which is the representation of one's illumination, enlightenment within this, within Freemasonry. So that's why we get the 32 degrees, and then through the study of Freemasonry and our participation within it, 33rd degree is the representation of Da'at. It is the representation of attainment of knowledge. So as you guys go through the, I'm assuming, you know, if everyone has gone through Scottish Rite or if you're about to go through it, you will receive this ring. And it's interesting to know within Judaism, there is a name for God. It is written in Hebrew in the upper right corner. And Hebrew, as most of you know, is read from left to right. And the letters are Yod, He, Vav, He, which is the holy of holy names. It is not pronounced by Jews even. For us, it is known as Yahovah. We also call God, this is God's name, Yahweh. The true pronunciation, though, was lost in the Torah. It was lost because Torah does not, the Hebrew language does not contain vowels, or vowels are written with dots kind of and, you know, indication within them, and Torah doesn't have any of that. So Torah is written with just consonants. And as a result, we don't know 100% the true name of God, or how this pronunciation would have been. So, but getting back to the Scottish Rite, why I mentioned all of this is the first letter of Yod He Vav He, or Yahweh, is the letter Yod. It is the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It is also considered the symbol of creation. From it, all other letters are derived. The way to think of it like this: imagine God as an author, right? He takes a pen, he puts it down on paper, his arm just barely jerks, right? That's it. You know, he made just a little tiny scribble. That's Yod. Yod is almost nothing but a dot because he just started writing, and from it comes everything else. It is the letter from which all other letters are derived, and yet we have it on our Scottish Rite ring. Yod itself has a numerical representation of 10 in Gematria. Gematria is a whole, you can do a whole another lecture on Gematria, and it is a, within Judaism, Gematria is this is Hebrew numerology, where each Hebrew letter is assigned a numerical value. And there's fascinating things you can find within it, that, for example, if you take a numerical value of father plus the numerical value of mother, it equals the numerical value of child. It is just mind-blowing how Hebrew language is full of interesting, I'll call them coincidences like that. So Yud has has a numerical value in gematria of 10, and we have 10 Sephiroth. So that's why that Yud for us as Masons is a representation of deity. It is the representation, it is the first masculine letter, it is the first masculine letter of the Holy of Names that is inscribed in the Trinity triangle to represent deity. And the triangle, as you guys know, does represent deity because deity essentially comes in 3. This is apparent in Judaism because, as I just showed you guys, in Kabbalism, we have the topmost triangle, which the crown triangle, which is represented by Keter, Chochmah, and Bina. Within Christianity, we have the Holy Father, we have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or the Spirit. Hinduism, you have Brahma, you have Vishnu, you have Shiva. So, and you have this trinity within many, many religions and philosophical kind of esoteric schools of that. So, and finally, applying this to our real life, we have, this is the spiritual, this is the practical and spiritual application of Kabbalism. All events, decisions, people we interact with can be viewed through the lens of the 10 Sephiroth that I've shown you guys about. And I encourage you guys to study, look into the Sephiroth and what they mean. The 10 Sephiroth can be used as a gauge for us as human beings and as Masons. Because of this, you guys are I'm sure everyone is familiar with tarot cards, which are based on Kabbalah. And as I'm sure you guys have seen, the fortune tellers use them to answer a question for you, predict the future, if you will. But what the tarot cards really are, and by the way, are modern day common cards that we play with, they're based on tarot cards, which is based on Kabbalah. The tarot cards are representation. It has is a representation of the Kabbalistic concept. It has 78 cards in the deck, and of them, which is 22 major arcana and 10 numbered cards. And there are other cards, obviously, as well, but those are the main 32 cards that you use and that have an explanation for each one, an interpretation, which help one combinatorially lay out the answer to a posed question. And a Kabbalist strives to, Kabbalists come into every action with an intention to honor God, as I mentioned. Intention is everything. Intention to worship God and to do good, to be grateful. The Kabbalist strives to do good deeds, reclaiming the sparks to be a better person. And finally, the mystical aspect. The following concepts I will mention, there are resources and individuals who have done full-blown lectures on each one, but this is enough. The reason I put them in here is to expose you guys to them, that if you guys get interested, you can explore them. On the mystical side of Kabbalah, you have, remember as I talked about enlightenment? The Enlightenment, or Nirvana, some other religions, philosophical schools of thought might call it. And Kabbalism is called Merkaba, which means chariot. And Merkaba is essentially something, comes from the vision of Ezekiel when he sees God emanating to him in a fiery chariot. And this is the first miracle, first description within the Torah in the Bible where an individual has, a direct interaction with God. And the Kabbalists pursue this state. Merkaba is viewed as a state that one can achieve through meditation on the 10 Sephiroth. So by meditating on the 10 Sephiroth and the names of God associated with each Sephiroth has its own God's name associated with it. One supposedly can attain Merkaba, which is enlightenment. One can also meditate on Tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton comes up all the way through Scottish Rite degrees, the Yod He Vav He. And supposedly, if one is able to, this is just at this point Gene's interpretation, if one is able to pronounce it correctly, perhaps one unlocks something in their mind, unlocks the pineal gland, the third eye, enlightenment, direct connection to God. Who knows? That's just my opinion. And finally, there's also some Kabbalists pursue the search for God's true 72-letter name through combinations of the Hebrew letters. So with that, this concludes my presentation, and I will welcome some questions. I'll do my best to answer, and then if you think of something later, feel free to email me at gene909@gmail.com.
Thank you, Brother Gene, for that presentation. If we could hold on questions for 2 seconds, I'd like to just kind of wrap up the session here with the intro slides, if we could. Again, the upcoming schedule. Please go out to the Scottish Rite website to sign up for any of the upcoming sessions. And again, I posted the survey into the chat session, so if you would please be sure to submit that for us, if you could please. Thank you. With that,